In Case You Missed It with Christina Williams is an iHeart Women's Sports production in partnership with Deep Blue Sports and Entertainment. Welcome to another episode of In Case You Missed It with Christina Williams. And I want to call this new segment Fan Out Friday because every Friday we are bringing you the most exclusive interviews with some of the biggest movers and shakers in the women's sports and women's basketball industry. So as you guys know, obviously, I am a huge women's sports fan, but if you ever try to catch a game at a local bar, you know how rare it is to find women's sports playing on the television screens. I know for the most part in New York City, whenever I'm at a local sports bar, I have to stop a waiter and ask them and request to put on WNBA games. So I'm super excited about this week's guest because she is creating a space that is truly welcoming for the women's sports community. In her community and beyond. And so in 2022, Jenny Nguyen created the Sports Bar. And I'm super excited to have Jenny on the show because I've gotten to know her over the last few years and super huge fan of everything that she's doing to change the game. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Hey, Christina, thank you so much for having me on.
I know this has been a long time coming, I feel like, in terms of getting you on the show and getting an interview done. But welcome to In Case You Missed It. We are super excited to have you on this week. And so before we dive into your story and talk about all things women's basketball and women's sports, we like to ask every guest who comes on the show to share what a win for them was in the past week. And we call it the win of the week. So what was one of your wins this week?
Oh my gosh, what was one of my wins this week? Well, there's a personal one. I was able to score some free tickets to the Thorns game for my mom and dad. It was Father's Day, so yesterday it was for Father's Day, and it happened to be the Pride match at the Thorns too. So I knew it was gonna kind of sell out. Portland's showing out, and it's about 77 degrees yesterday, so I knew all of Portland was gonna be there. And kind of last minute, I got in touch with my dad, and I was just like, "Hey, I'd love to take you to this afternoon game." And they were able to squeeze us in there, and the Thorns pulled off a W. So it was just like a win-win situation. So on the personal note, I handed one off to Dad for being so awesome, and got to celebrate with him and some fans. And the Thorns got a W, so that felt like really good.
That's
As
like a
far as
quadruple win.
I know. It felt really, and that was just yesterday, so it's really fresh in my mind. And then when it comes to the sports bra, I just feel like there's so many things going on all at once. I think one really big one from last week was we did our very first weeklies. We're calling them weeklies with our new franchisees. So we did our very first weekly calls where we set aside 1 hour, at least 1 hour every week with each of our franchisees to kind of discuss where they are in the process, what questions they have, what help they need. And we're kind of setting up some visits to go out to the cities and take a look at some places. So that was a huge first step for us after our announcement, is kind of like looking at sites. So kind of setting up those first calls with franchisees and making sure that they're on track and that we're being supportive. That felt like really, really good and a really great first step after the announcement.
Jenny, I love that for you. Not only did you get free tickets to the Storm game, you were able to get to the Thorns game as well. They got the win. You got to spend time with your dad, but you're building an empire. And so I love that for you so much. So we're going to dive right into it. What first sparked your love for women's sports, and especially women's basketball, because this is a women's basketball show, but what sparked your interest in women's sports?
Oh my gosh, well, heard that. And I think you know this, Christina, but my first love was basketball. I picked up a basketball around the age of 5 or 6. Started learning how to dribble really young. My dad was a huge soccer fan, so he tried to push me into soccer, and I was just not having it. So I played basketball from super young age, and it was really the only sport that I really gravitated towards. And as I got older, I just, was a super fan. Grew up, born and raised here in Portland, so grew up in the Blazers era. Right after they won a championship, I was born into this incredible fandom of, basketball and kind of the highs and lows of being a Trailblazers fan. For those who know. But then there was this undercurrent that became a roar recently of women's sports fandom. From a super young age, my dad was taking me to University of Portland college soccer games. And this was when, we had Tiffany Milbritt and Shannon McMillan playing. And then he took me to the games where the Rapinoe sisters were playing with Sinclair. And then we had an ABL team, the Portland Power. And then we had a WNBA team, the Portland Fire. And we got season tickets to those games. And then the Thorns came around and just like kind of defined women's sports fandom for soccer. What seems to me they defined it like internationally. Like we had just an all out crowd. And so I kind of grew up, loving basketball. That was my sport and kind of what I was really gravitated towards. But then kind of grew up in Portland where there was this really strong current of women's sports fandom. And so that kind of just kind of crescendoed into, me thinking about creating a space for women's sports fandom in the shape and form of a sports bar.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you talked about growing up being an athlete and how that shaped your fandom, but also the sports culture in Portland and how that also helped shaped you and your journey. How do you think that all of those elements came together when you came up with the concept for the sports bar?
I mean, for the sports bra, it was crazy because as I got older, I started to go out with my friends, and all of my friends I made through basketball. And so we would go out, and whether it was a birthday party or a pre-party or post-party, whatever it was, we were trying to watch women's basketball mostly. And it was always a challenge. And so we'd go to these sports bars to try to eat and drink in public, hang out with friends, and catch a game. And it was just really challenging. And so for years, that was kind of the status quo. That was kind of the norm. And then, the only career I've ever had. So I played basketball, blew out my knee when I was 19. So right before my first freshman basketball game, I had kind of what was a devastating injury. Like it was a blow to my ego. My identity was wrapped up in basketball. So I felt like I had like lost my identity when I got injured. And so right after that, I kind of fell into cooking. And so I started cooking in college, fell in love with cooking, and then went into the culinary field. So for a little over 15 years, I was cooking in kitchens and became a chef. And so during that time, I'm playing pickup basketball. In college, I played intramural. I never went back to actually the coach tried to get me to redshirt. And I think like mentally, I just wasn't there after my injury. I just couldn't, I rehabbed, but I just wasn't as strong of a player mentally. And so I played intramural, played pickup ball, and then cooked. So when it came to realizing that the sports bra might be something that we could put together in Portland because of, my love of basketball. I had, this culinary background where I had managed and run like kitchens, which really didn't prepare me to be a business owner. Let's just say that. Like that is just like one tiny aspect of everything else. I really needed a ton of help to get the business going. But those two things combined with how Portland felt like it had always kind of embraced women's sports, along with my love of sports and my like culinary background, it just kind of felt like the perfect storm. And Portland being the town that I was born and raised in and grew up in, it just felt like, to me, it almost felt like if the sports bra as a concept didn't work in Portland, I wasn't sure if it would work anywhere because it felt to me like Portland was the place to kind of be the starting ground, and I was like, okay, let's just try it. And if it doesn't work in Portland, I'm not sure it would work anywhere else. So that's kind of my mentality about it. But also, it's my hometown, so I love this city.
Isn't it amazing how all of the dots on your journey end up connecting and you're like, wait, I was freaking out for no reason. Like I had to get derailed here with an injury because later on in life, I was going to create something that was going to be a movement. Like when you look back in hindsight and you connect all the little dots of your journey. You've said this before. You said it's a traditional sports bar. All we have to do is change the channel. Why do you think that mission resonates with so many people around the world?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is when I opened the sports bra, I thought it was just changing the channel, but ultimately it's flipping the status quo. So it's to me, it's the tiny changes that make all the difference. And so when I conceptually thought of the sports bra, I was like, okay, all we're going to do is change the channel. But when we had the opportunity to create the space, we went about every aspect of it with intentionality. And so with that intentionality was the opportunity to change the narrative, flip the status quo, put everything on its head. You know, whatever we didn't like about the traditional sports bar, we had the opportunity to give it a new life, give it a new story. So when it came down to, we had 21 taps. What kind of beer are we going to put on tap? And I was just like, oh, I wonder how many women are making beer. Turns out there's hundreds and hundreds of women in Portland making beer. So everything on a tap list is either owned, operated, or made with a woman in the brew house. And so just these tiny little ways that we could like change the narrative in that space. We were like, let's do it with intentionality and see what kinds of things we can create. So it really started with changing the channel, but it had a ripple effect. And I think that what people why it resonates with people is because for so long it felt as if sports bars, your traditional sports bars, were made for like 50% of the population. And it really wasn't made for everybody. And so the opportunity to have inclusive spaces, to have representation on TV and on the walls, to be surrounded by women's sports memorabilia versus men's sports memorabilia. There's a different vibe to it. Women's sports flags, to have autographs of women athletes, from local athletes to international athletes, to come in and just be surrounded by like a dedicated space for them. That feels special. So I think there's a lot of things that resonate with folks, from athletes to non-athletes, sports fans to non-sports fans. And then we do it through the menu too. So we have like all our vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and then all of our meat lovers. We have like the full spectrum of things for folks to dine on and to drink. We have a bunch of NA. Um, so we're finding like zero proof drinks are getting more and more popular these days, which is awesome. So we've been adding more and more. So it's just like the ability to see people and have them feel seen in the space. Um, and what's crazy is like, again, it started out with just changing what I felt like was just changing the channel. But when it got to it, we could approach everything with intentionality. And I think that that makes a huge difference in helping people feel seen, feel represented, and feel like they belong, which creates just a great experience for everybody, not just in fandom, but just in enjoyment.
And I think beyond that, I mean, what you've been able to do in terms of the brand, the sports bra, being able to activate at tentpole women's sports events and, uh, you know, market your business in different avenues, but also give other women an opportunity as well. I applaud you for that. We obviously know that women's sports is at an all-time high right now, not just women's basketball, women's soccer, tennis, across the board. Women's sports is just blowing up, and it's like we've been here this whole time. People are just starting to take notice. But when you first opened up the sports bra in 2022, what was the overall reactions that you received from the public? And then at any point when things started to turn for you and go on the up and up, or was there ever a point where you had to eventually turn people away from the sports bra in Portland because it would get too crowded?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I want to say that from the moment it became public knowledge that the sports bra was happening, there was an overwhelming outpouring of support. It was like the floodgates had opened. People came out of like internationally, even people were DMing us, writing letters, sending stuff in the mail. It was just an incredible outpouring of support. And again, I had no idea. I thought, maybe in Portland, maybe for this community, maybe for folks like me and my friends giving us a space. I had no idea it was such a universal, not even a desire, but almost like a need. to create these spaces. So the outpouring of support was very palpable from day one, from the moment people found out it was happening. And the space in Portland, like I'm pretty risk averse and I had no idea what it was going to be like. Because when I did research, it turns out there's never been a women's sports bar. So I had no idea if it was going to work. And so I basically picked a place that, if the whole thing failed, I could manage to get myself out of trouble. And so the bar is a 40-seat bar. It's 50 people, standing room only. Uh, like low key, we basically double that capacity on game days. Don't tell the fire marshal. Um, but yes, but like, when there's a championship game or if there's like a huge playoff game, we fill up in 5 minutes and then it's done. So it's very clear that spaces like this have been needed. And it was just a matter of kind of thinking outside the box. And, I remember when I sat my parents down and I told them my idea for the sports bra. And by the time I got to telling my parents, I kind of had made up my mind. Like there was no like changing my mind. I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm just letting you know. And the very first thing my dad said was like, so you're saying a space like this has never existed before? And I said, yeah, from all I can tell, no one has ever done this. And the very first thing he said was, maybe there's a reason why. And when he said that, it kind of triggered this thing in me. Which was just like, if that were our mentality about everything, we'd still be in caves, like not even thinking about rubbing two sticks together because fire would have been invented already, right? So in my mind, I was just like, you know what? If this is how we invent things, this is how we progress. When we need a space and it doesn't exist, we create it, right? And like it just needed somebody to do it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I'd always wonder if it would. And that was kind of one of the triggering points for me where I was just like, let's try this. But since then, it's just been incredibly like welcome. Like there's always haters. Like whenever you disturb systems of power or systemic systems, the folks in power or the folks who believe they're in power, they get upset. And so yes, there were haters. I personally went through some stuff. The store itself had some vandalism, like things that happened. But kind of it kind of goes to show that you're on the right track when there are some folks upset because you're kind of rocking the boat, right? So that was just part of the beginning. And then as time went on, it just became more and more apparent that spaces like the bra needed to exist. And right from like probably a month in, I started to get emails from other women from across the country and even other cities around the world asking how I did it. Would I recommend them to do it themselves? And, so much of the folks out there right now opening spaces like the sports bra or their own version of a women's sports bar to create spaces for community and fandom, all of that is so beautiful and so collaborative and so supportive. I'm sure you know about this, but there's a Slack channel that all of us are on. And I want to say like every week, a couple more folks get added, whether they're thinking about starting their own, whether they're thinking about franchising with the sports bra, whether they're, hosting watch parties or, just trying to make all of our lives better by helping create more fandom, create systems, whatever it takes. And so, it's just when you involve women, it's just so collaborative and so beautiful. And I feel so grateful to be a part of this movement. And it really has become a movement. And what started out as just like my little dream of having a spot in Portland. And I was just like, if this can last a couple of years, I'll be happy. Let's give some fans a space to have fun and celebrate in community. And that's that. But then it became something else and it unlocked just so much potential. And I just am so grateful. I'm so grateful for it every day.
I love that whatever it takes mentality. And I like to call people like us, Jenny, good disruptors, because I sort of did the same thing when it came to the digital space and how women's basketball was covered in the digital space. And 7 years later, we see more and more coverage in the digital space, kind of how like I used to do it when I first started covering the WNBA.
OG,
So I like
you
to
the
call us
OG.
good disruptors, okay?
That's
And
it.
Cat Williams said it best. You need a little bit of a hater. You need haters. If you don't have any haters, you're not doing something right. But it is a good balance to have. And um, you talked about the sports bra being welcoming to so many people in a place that is necessary. You've been able to welcome non-binary, queer, and trans individuals. Is there a story from a sports fan or a patron who now has a place to watch the sports that they love that kind of keeps you going and lets you know, reminds you like, this is my why. This is why I started the sports bra. This is why I created this space.
Girl, I ain't gonna cry this morning. I'm not crying this morning on our interview. There are so many stories, like legitimately, there are so many stories from, so we're an all ages bar until 10 p.m. So we try to bring families, kids, everybody in, and try to normalize women's sports on TV and create fans out of everybody, right? So there are moments where I catch a little kid watching women's sports on TV and their eyes are just huge, glazed over, their mouth is open. They're witnessing somebody playing the sport that they love and that they can relate to. They see themselves in them. And when I think about that moment, I think about, I can't help but think about my younger self. And if I had been in a space at the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 15, 17, 21, if I'd been in a space that had women's sports like that, what kind of an impact it would have made on my life. And I see that in kids at the bra. And so like whenever I see a little kid kind of like just all in, fandom for women's sports and being surrounded by adults cheering for the same people, that is part of my why. And then when it comes to, the community, the LGBTQIA plus community, it's incredible that, I have a lot of intersectionality based on my lived experience. And when I opened the sports bra, I really did it based on my women's sports fandom. And it hadn't occurred to me that I'm also a first generation Vietnamese American queer woman. Right. And so when I opened the space, I was just like, oh, I'm going to create a space that I feel really good in. And it turns out that there's a lot of intersectionality there. And when I did that, I have friends that are also very intersectional. And so just again, being intentional about certain things helps so much. And a lot of it is such a learning process too. We open the doors and people were like, hey, Jenny, have you thought about doing this? Because it would really help us feel more seen. And I'm like, oh my God, of course I hadn't even considered that. So it's like all of these things are learning also. And that's another huge part that I always want to like emphasize on folks with small businesses or even massive multi-billion dollar companies that you need to continue to listen. You need to continue to listen to your employees, your team, your customers. They're going to bring in viewpoints of what you don't know, like that I don't have a lived experience with. And hearing that helps create a better world and a better environment for everything. And so when I think about like when you asked that question, there was one story that kind of stood out in my mind. And there was a person who had fled a Central American country, and this person had been living in their home for fear of retaliation of leaving the house because they had been under kind of some severe death threats and things like that from living in a Central American country. So they had moved to the United States seeking asylum and they hadn't left the house in months. And one of their very, very close relatives convinced them to come to the sports bra. And it was the first time that they had left the house and been in a public space in general in years. And I met this person and, we didn't speak the same language, but there was very much this exchange of sincere gratitude. And I just thought about how this space, again, I had created it for fandom, for women's sports fandom, and how it had become almost like a sanctuary for more than that. And, there are moments that are bittersweet because I'm grateful that at the Sports Bra, my team and I have been able to create what feels like a very safe space for a lot of folks. But then there's this bitter part that there aren't spaces like this more often or everywhere. And so, that's kind of an extreme case, but it really does kind of amplify the idea that the sports bra has this certain something about it that is really special. And that's done with intentionality. It's not by accident. And I think that I want to impress on people that as business owners or managers or even employees, you can help create these spaces for folks who absolutely need it and deserve it. And we try to like promote this welcoming atmosphere for everybody. And we always say like everyone welcome except for like the haters, no bigots. Um,
I love that.
yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
It's just like, yeah, we get phone calls and it's just like, are kids allowed? Are men allowed? Are these, that, and the others? And it's like, yeah, everybody. As long as you come in with love. Yeah, absolutely. Women's sports fandom, come on in.
Well, I can't wait to finally visit. I know I told you back in October when we were at the WNBA Finals Game 2. I was like, I have to get there. And I've been saying it for years, and I really mean it. I really have to get there. If I have to make a solo trip to Portland just to visit, I want to visit the OG Sports Bar. But what should I order when I visit? Because you talked about being a chef and the menu being intentional. What's your favorite thing on the menu?
Oh my gosh, girl, I got so many favorites now. So we brought on a new chef a couple months ago, several months ago now, and the menu had stayed relatively unchanged since I wrote it in 2022. And as a proud chef, I'm just like, menu's the way it is. It's going to stay forever. And this new young gunner, I mean, she's extremely talented. She came in with so much passion, so much experience, and she just was just like, Jenny, I really think that we can up level the menu. And I was just like, okay, let's take a look. And she basically pitched me a whole thing. She had a presentation, everything, and then we did an R&D. I tasted everything and I was blown away. So a bunch of the stuff on the menu is kind of the same, but up leveled a little bit. And then she added some brand new menu items. So right now I happen to be like super excited about the menu, but there's some OG ones that are from the first day until now are the same that she didn't touch because they're perfect. One, the very first one I got to mention is the first thing on the menu, which is my mom's baby back ribs, which is
Oh,
it's based off of a classic Vietnamese dish that I grew up eating. And it's literally word for word like mom's recipe. The only difference is we changed it from pork shoulder, like braised pork shoulder, to baby back ribs. So it could be like finger food, but it's delicious. It's sticky, salty, sweet. It's so good. And that's kind of a signature dish, the baby back ribs, mom's baby back ribs. And then a couple of my personal favorites right now is the smash burger, classic smash burger, American cheese, griddled onions. Chef added a little burger sauce to it to make a little extra special. And it's kind of classic, it's nothing too frilly. I'm kind of a simple person, so I like a simple burger, and it kind of highlights the beef, which is from a female rancher out in Eastern Oregon. So Corey Carmen is 100% grass-fed beef. Not very many female ranchers out there, so we had to give a shout out. So all of our beef is coming from Carmen Ranch. And then the other thing that Roxy added, which is actually a holdover from one of our old chef's specials, is a dry rub fried chicken wing. Um,
I love me some chicken wings, Jenny.
it's real good. It's real good. We started out with a Vietnamese version only on the menu, and now we have three versions that are all outstanding. So we have the Vietnamese version, which is named after my Aunt Tina, and then we have a buffalo wing, which is of in-house fermented chilies, so made from scratch buffalo sauce, and then the dry rub, which I'm really a big fan of because it's just spicy enough. I'm kind of sensitive palate, so it's just spicy enough, dipped in ranch or blue cheese, and then I'm good to go. It's real good. It's
And
like
I'm getting so hungry
mhm,
just thinking
finger
about
licking
all
good.
the amazing food. So the baby back ribs, the rubbed wings, and the smash burger. All right, I'm gonna order all of that when I visit.
That's
So
it.
there's also a lot of excitement around the sports bra this past few weeks because you all made a huge announcement with Alexis Ohanian. So What was the announcement, and what should we be excited for in the future for the sports bra?
I guess I didn't hint at it early on. I kind of just like blurted it out. But a couple weeks ago, we announced that we're franchising to 4 new cities. And the announcement really is kind of the first step. Like right after we announced, it basically means we found people in those cities that want to open the sports bra in their communities, which we're so excited about. And those 4 cities are Las Vegas, St. Louis, Indianapolis, and Boston. Yeah, so we're really excited about that. And so first step is the announcement. Now we're on to like finding a site, and we got to secure funds for them. And then we got to do the build out. So a lot of folks have been asking, when is it opening? Where is it at? And it's like we don't know any of that stuff. But we're really excited, and we just couldn't wait to tell the cities so that they can also get behind these new franchisees. And our goal is to make sure that our franchisees, people know that they're the owners and operators of these they're
Mm,
basically small businesses. It's not
yeah,
us opening them. We're helping to support an opening, but these are community spaces, just like the Sports Bra in Portland is a community space. And that's the reason why we decided to go with franchising versus opening our own stores, is because we really wanted people who live, breathe, and, support the women's sports fandom and communities in those cities to be the ones owning these spaces.
I absolutely love that. Having a community hand in building their community, but also building women's sports all around. Last question for you before you get out of here. You talked about your franchisees and just community building, but what advice would you tell someone who wants to open a sports bra franchise?
Oh my gosh. Well, technically, I can't really say too much because there's a lot of franchise
Ooh,
laws. But the first step would be check out our website. On our website, there's tons of information. So go to the sports bra. I think gosh, I can't even remember. The
sports bra
sportsbraofficial.com.
official. Yep.
The sportsbraofficial.com will get you to where you need to go. There's tons of information on there, and there's a phone number that you can reach out to us, and connecting with us is the first step. And we announced we were franchising in April of last year. Then we opened a website for franchising in October of last year. And it took us from October until, a couple weeks ago to really vet people and really get to know people and understand where they're coming from. And honestly, the franchise world is pretty massive, and the franchise business is incredibly complex and a huge undertaking. But as the sports bra, we're kind of doing things a little bit unconventional. So we've gotten a lot of advice, and we're taking as much as advice as we can. But we're also like, you know what? This is the sports bra. We're going to have to do things our own way on some of these things, because we are kind of paving a new path for, there's not. It's been a long time since in the food and beverage market that there's been a new kind of market, and we're kind of defining that now. And so it's a little bit unconventional, but we're here for it. We're excited, a little scared, a little nervous, but all of those things are probably really good for us as we grow. But yeah, I would say reach out to us. Let's get the conversation started. And we're just really excited to open more of these for more folks.
Well, I'm super excited for you, Jenny. I just want to thank you again for joining us this week on In Case You Missed It with Khristina Williams on the iHeart Women's Sports Network. Super excited for the sports bra franchises across Las Vegas, Indianapolis, St. Louis, and Boston. Make sure you guys follow Jenny and her journey all across social media. And we'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much, Jenny.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you, Khristina.
All right, you guys, that's going to do it for this week's episode of In Case You Missed It with Khristina Williams. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you back here next week. In Case You Missed It with Khristina Williams is an iHeart Women's Sports production in partnership with Deep Blue Sports and Entertainment. You can find us on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.